Good morning, everyone. I'm Jennifer Clark, the Operations Coordinator with the New York State Coalition Against Domestic Violence. And I'd like to be the first to welcome you to today's webinar presentation, the final in our training series on career empowerment. Before I hand things over to Project Coordinator Naseem Sarabandi, I'm just going to go over a few housekeeping items for interacting in today's webinar. We're going to keep all participants muted, so if you have any questions or you'd like to share any resources or comments, please do so in the chat box. And in the chat box, you'll also find a link to a copy of the presentation for today if you'd like to follow along at home. We are recording today's presentation, and a link to that recording, along with an additional link to the materials, will be sent to you in a follow-up email in the next few days. It will also include the links to any of the previous sessions in this training series. And with that, we are also offering ASL interpretation as well as closed captioning for today's webinar. You can turn closed captioning on or off, or view the transcript by clicking the More button in your toolbar, and you should see a button related to transcript or captioning. And with that, I will hand things over to Naseem Sarabandi.
Thank you, Jennifer. Hi, everyone. I'm Naseem Sarabandi, Project Coordinator at the Coalition. I want to welcome everybody to today's webinar and provide a little bit of introduction about what we are covering here. This series was 4 webinars, and we did 3 webinars in the last month and the month before that. And it's mostly about the career empowerment for the survivors of domestic violence. We overviewed the job readiness, as well as the difference between building a career or finding a job. And also last session was about the interview guidelines and knowing the rights of survivors. And today is mostly about job interviews and the common practices, about the questions that the survivors will be asked in the interview. And our amazing presenters today is Franchely Inoa, and she is the STEP job specialist at the YWCA of Union County, New Jersey. She's been working with the survivors of domestic violence for several years, and before being a job specialist, she was actually a domestic violence court advocate. And she holds a bachelor's degree in sociology and has a good years of experiences working with the survivors and domestic violence and IPV survivors. With that, I'm going to hand it to Franchely to start the webinar, and I hope you are going to enjoy today's presentation. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Franchely Inoa. I apologize ahead of time. My voice is a little raspy today, so bear with me. I would like to talk a little bit about the YWCA for those that don't know. We are the leading domestic violence agency in the Union County area, New Jersey. Specifically, I work for the STEP program, which is the Skills Training and Empowerment Program. And so we help survivors of domestic violence and survivors of financial abuse empower themselves financially through coaching, through workshops that we host, as well as some hiring events. So with that background information, I'd like to get started with our webinar today. So we're going to be talking about job interview skills with clients. So some of the topics we're going to touch base today are providing the advocates with the overall education, the basics of resume writing and interview prep. So giving some examples of common interview questions and best ways to explain to clients how to respond to these questions. Focusing specifically right now on interview questions directly related to COVID is very important right now. And talking about mock interviewing clients, that's going to be a big part of the presentation, and discussing certain questions that would benefit them in preparing ahead of time. Okay, so a big part of preparing for job interviews is writing the resume. A lot of our clients have never created a resume before. They're not familiar with the format, and they're not familiar with the type of vernacular that they should use. So going through resumes step by step can be extremely beneficial for clients. Some of the features that we can list is the personal information of the client. Very important to inform the client not to state their exact address. Naming the city and state that they live in is enough. As well as listing their education, you would like to include the following details, like the name of the school that they attended and the program that they graduated from, the city and state where they studied, where the school is located, the degree or certificate they had received, as well as the major that they studied in and the year they completed it. So all this information is important to give the employer a well-rounded idea of the client's educational background. Okay, so when writing a resume with a client, you can always add a job objective. It's not too common, but it can be very beneficial and very helpful. A client's job objective should describe exactly what their goal is, their qualifications, and what position they're applying for. So the trick is to keep it very short and sweet. The client can express why they would be good for this position without giving too much detail. So an example can be a talented secretary pursuing office manager position with global communications. So in this example, the client would state their skills, right here, in this particular example, writing talented secretary. The client included the position that they're going for, as well as the company where they're applying. So it's a very well-rounded statement, very short and sweet. Another example can be patient and compassionate nurse assistant looking for a stable full-time job in a hospital that will allow me to utilize my skills and assist with personal growth and other job opportunities. So this is a great example of a little bit more detail while still keeping it short and sweet. In this statement as well, the person adding the part where it says that will allow me to utilize my time and skills really shows motivation and dedication to this work. So those are good words to add to a job objective. Again, remembering this is absolutely not mandatory. So depending on the client's experience, the position that they're applying for, and their comfortability adding this to the resume is where you can decide to add this or not. Okay, so continuing with resume writing with clients. So making sure to assist the client in organizing their resume to make it look neat and professional. Again, keeping their full address out. Keeping the resume to one page, back and front, listing their most current job first. So like previously mentioned, a lot of clients maybe have not created resumes in the past. And if they have, maybe have not had examples of appropriate words to use in a resume. So I find it very beneficial to look up action words with clients before creating the resume with them. Giving them a good understanding of what action words are, because they're very important when it comes to writing a resume. An example of action words can be managed, ran, created, answered, handled, etc. So these type of action words are specifically descriptive to the type of work that the client would be doing or has done. Talk about major accomplishments at each job. Make sure accomplishments are listed as they are quantifiable. So an example is, as a result of handling an additional 60 calls per day, I was recognized as Employee of the Month. So this type of accomplishment is measurable, stating specifically having the additional 60 calls per day. And it's a great example of the detail that would make a resume successful. Again, so I'd like to reiterate the importance of action words. A big portion of the resume is going to be in the description of the position that the client had previously had. So making sure that in each sentence that they're using the appropriate words and they're keeping it in the same tense, preferably past tense when it comes to writing a resume. So more about resume writing with clients. So some of the features like we had previously mentioned, like the work history is going to be a big part of the resume. Naming the employer or the company that you worked with, as well as the city or state where you had this job or the client had this job. When did they start working there? It's important to list the date with the month and the year. It's okay if they don't remember the exact date of the month, as long as the month and the year is listed, as well as when they stopped working there. And if they are still currently working there, they can put present or currently working there. It should be the exact font and the exact colors throughout. That goes part of the organized structure of the resume that some clients might not be familiar with, whether you're using Publisher or Microsoft Word. These type of applications might not be easy to navigate for clients. So naming exactly the name of the employer in the company, stating the city and the state right next to the company. And again, emphasizing that the uniform structure of the resume, making sure that it's all aligned to one side, making sure the spaces in between each line are the same. Sometimes the spaces between left and right as well, whether it be between the name of the employer and the date where you started working, making sure it's consistently uniform throughout. I have an example on the next slide. So as you can notice, the organization of the resume throughout, everything has the same font and it's all in the same size. This makes it easy for the employer to read. So as stated, the education goes at the top. As you can see, the location would be right next to the name of the school, as well as the location being right next to the name of the company under work history. And the year of completion for school, as well as the time period that the person worked at this location, can be listed to the side, uniformly on the right, preferably. And at the bottom of the resume is where the client can begin to list their skills. Keeping in mind the type of position that they're applying for is very important. Okay. So now we're going to move on to job interview preparations. So some of the questions for clients to consider before the interview. So in the type of work I'm looking for, what will I wear at the job? What are the appearance standards for the type of work, company, or industry that I'll be working in? This is important to know because you can base your attire for the interview based on this information. So, and now that after the pandemic and after COVID, the reality of online interviews is becoming more relevant. So a lot of times clients don't think this through too much as far as their attire because they are expecting an online interview. But whether the interview is virtual or in person, the attire is extremely important. Not only should the client feel confident in what they're wearing, but also feel comfortable. So the color of the person's attire, the jewelry that they're wearing, especially in a virtual interview where their face and their neck area, shoulders area is mostly visible, can be very important. Trying to avoid bold patterns that stand out and can be distracting is extremely beneficial. A lot of our clients also might be experiencing their first interview, and attire can really speak to a person's confidence and add confidence to that person as well. So making sure that they know what type of job that they are going for, the type of attire that that industry requires, really can give them the confidence to prepare ahead of time. The truth is that first impressions make a big difference, and first impressions are mainly based on appearance. So we don't want to scare the clients with this information, but empowering them with this information and really preparing them on this aspect can make them feel more comfortable entering the interview. If a client does not have any interview clothes, search for an organization in the area that provide professional clothing to the client. So these type of resources can be extremely beneficial in this type of work. We do use Just for Success in Northern New Jersey, and they've been very helpful to our clients. Begin a professional clothes drive for clients as well, if that can help. Our agency does a good job in consistently making sure that we have professional clothing coming in for clients. We have a little section in the office when clients come. We'll before the pandemic, when they would physically come into the office, they were able to browse the section and see if there's anything that they might be interested in or fits them. Making a first impression and having a good appearance for that first impression can really set the tone for the interview. So we really want to empower and set this client up for success. Okay, so this also speaks to talking to the clients of the importance of looking professional as well as acting professional. So remember not to talk down to clients, where you don't want to come from a place where we assume that they know nothing as far as interviews and as far as preparing for them. Talking to them about their experience is very helpful to see where they're at, how much they know. Try to make it a back and forth conversation as opposed to you just telling them and listing off what they need to do. Maybe as talking to them can assess their comfortability on certain topics, maybe like communication or appearance. And that can help you gauge more what information needs to be shared and to what degree. It's definitely beneficial to talk about hair and makeup, keeping it simple. This can be a touchy subject. We don't want to come off unsensitive to people's preference for hair and makeup, but just letting them know that keeping it simple can be beneficial for a professional first impression. Jewelry, less is more. So avoiding bold jewelry that can be distracting, avoiding sneakers and heels that might be uncomfortable to walk in. Again, we empower the client to wear whatever makes them feel most comfortable. If they feel comfortable in heels, that's great for them. But definitely talking to them about their level of comfortability and what works best for them. Bring something such as a pen or a pad. A lot of times clients don't come prepared with that type of material and end up, writing stuff down on their phone, which is what clients have told me down in the past. They have felt a little frazzled in that moment. So having something to write down, a pen or a pad, can be beneficial in those situations. Okay. At this point, would we like to open up the chat to any questions? Okay, if not, we can move on to common interview questions. So again, these questions, as well as the previous information we've talked about, is extremely beneficial to discuss prior to the interview, maybe a few days before, so you can really get in all the information that you need. These questions are good to think about beforehand and not have an answer too prepared, but kind of have an idea of what these questions mean to you as far as the client coming into the interview. So what does the interviewer want to know? So when you talk about yourself, you really want to talk about how your skills have been applied in the past in a work environment and how you've been able to grow those skills and apply them in your current job or how you would like to apply them in your future job. So what the applicant's current role is and the accomplishments they've had, how the applicants got to where they are, and what the applicant is looking to do next. So an example is, I'm currently a part-time receptionist at insert company name, where I handle office responsibilities in a busy work environment. I enjoy the type of work and want to continue it, so I am looking for a full-time job with a company that I can grow at. I am a motivational worker who is great at multitasking and likes speaking to customers. I'm hoping to find some place that will let me use the skills I've learned and put them to good use. When I found this opportunity, I thought this was what I was looking for. I'm so happy to be here. So another question that comes up a lot and is very beneficial for the client to think about beforehand is, what can you bring to the company? This question most often than not will come up. And having an answer to this question can also offer the client some confidence entering the interview. What are the strengths that will help the client succeed in this position? So a lot of the times our clients who have been experiencing financial abuse or whose financial careers might have been stunted by the domestic violence situation might not have much work experience. So a lot of our clients, when asked these questions, don't know how to pinpoint positive attributes that they have. And some clients don't realize how some skills like reliability, punctuality, communication can really go, and how they can really help you grow in a company. So talking to the client about their positive attributes and their skills ahead of time, even if it feels a little bit like pulling teeth, even if they find it difficult to answer certain questions, making them feel comfortable and empowering them on the skills and the qualities that maybe you have observed in them can empower them to find a little bit more about themselves. So make sure the client researches the company to find out what their guiding principles are. So if this involves some form of mission statement, the client can better find ways to answer that question. What does the company need from the client? An organized patient receptionist with the ability to independently make decisions that will benefit the company. Explain how you were able to be what the company needs at a previous job. So stating what you have been able to bring to previous positions can also be a way to answer that question, especially if it is relevant to the position that you're applying for. An example of this, I was able to come up with solutions to help organize patient files in the doctor's office by creating a better method of labeling them. So this is a great example of how a skill like organization can truly benefit a client when it comes to growth to a company and adding value to a company. A skill that might not be recognized immediately by a client as notably as a skill that's worth pinpointing. They might not think organization is something worth mentioning or something too important, but it can actually be what moves the client to growth in the company. So a question that always comes up in the interviews is, what are some of your strengths? The client can pick whichever strength they would rather talk about and the one most essential to the position that they're applying to. So for example, in a medical setting, a good example of skills can be compassionate, calm, patient, fast learner, and not easily made nervous. In an office setting, a good example of strengths might be organized, good with people, knows how to take control of situations if necessary. If the job is in a fast-paced environment, they want someone who can multitask and complete tasks quickly. So this is to describe the different types of skills that different job positions might value more. And this is to speak to the client answering this type of question. They really would it would really benefit them to research the type of position that they're applying for and thinking about what qualities they have that best fit those positions and really add value to those positions. Okay. So another big question that comes up is, do you have any weaknesses? Now, this question can be very difficult to answer. Clients should not stay on this topic for a long time, especially because trying to answer the question, the client might trip over their words or give too much information. Trying to avoid saying things like, I don't have any. I can't think of any weaknesses right now. Those type of statements can come off wrong in an interview. So something you can say as an example is, at times, I want to get the work done just right, and I will hold off handing in an assignment. Handing on an assignment is I feel it needs to be perfect. I can lose track of time because I get very involved in the work that I do. I will help a coworker finish their work, and I will stay at work longer if I have to. So these are examples of weaknesses that are beneficial to bring up in an interview. So the client, for example, in the second statement, I can lose track of time. The client is admitting a weakness that they have, while still at the same time making it well-rounded, where it gives off positive connotation because I get very involved with the work that I do. So promoting the client's weakness in a way that still shows that there can be growth from that, or that they're working and that weakness is something they can work on. Okay, so another common question is, what is an example at your last job where you had to deal with a difficult situation? So these questions depend on the type of work that you do. So a formula for telling a story in an interview would be setting the scene for the situation, explaining your role in the situation, what did you do, and share the outcome. So when talking to the clients about these specific types of situations, you want to have them think about a difficult situation that resulted positively, where there might have been growth, there might have been improvement in communication between two coworkers. There might have been a good exhibition of skills on the client's behalf. So thinking about the specific difficult situation where the client can display all of those things. So a good example is maybe if the client is dealing with in a customer service environment, they had to de-escalate an angry customer. Maybe if they're working in the medical setting, they had to stay calm in a stressful medical emergency. As well as having an office role, maybe fixing a mistake with an invoice or setting an appointment appropriately or something like that. Again, emphasizing this difficult situation resulting in a positive outcome. The goal is not to just list a difficult situation that the client experienced. The goal is to list a difficult situation that the client handled well and resulted positively. The outcome resulted in some form of growth. Another common question, how do you deal with pressure or a stressful situation? So clients can talk about skills they have used in the past to deal with stressful situations at work. So using mindfulness to stay even-tempered and focus on finding a solution to the problem. Focusing on the positive and how it is important to use the stressful situations as a learning opportunity. That's extremely important when discussing dealing under pressure and under stressful situation. The client wants to focus on the positive aspects on how they deal with stress and how they deal with that stressful situation. Sometimes, like we've talked about in the past, this is the client's first work experience. They don't have much experience to speak from. In these moments, it's okay to talk about a personal anecdote that might relate to the job that you're applying for. If the personal anecdote displays skills that would be beneficial to the profession that you're applying for. For example, if the client is going for a caregiver position and they have a specific example of when they cared for a family member and how they managed a stressful situation, that can be beneficial in applying for a caregiver position, explaining the patients that they exhibited in that situation to handle the pressure. So they can find different ways to answer this question if they don't have specific work experience. That's why it's extremely beneficial to talk about these questions ahead of time, engage the client's answers, guiding them in the right direction. Some examples of not so great answers, and specifically stating not so great because we never want to tell a client that their answer is wrong or bad and be discouraging. We want to make sure we give feedback in an empowering way. So not so great answers might be, I put my head down and push through it. I can see how the person might think this is a positive answer or a good answer to this question. So the client is trying to say that they can get through the situation, even if it's stressful, but they're not really exhibiting any skills in that moment, in that answer, that can show positive growth in that stressful situation. Maybe stating something like, I don't get stressed out is too short. And also, we all know we all get stressed out at any given moment or at certain points in our lives. So definitely giving more detail and being a little bit more honest in that moment can be beneficial. Okay. So another common question, tell me a time where you demonstrated leadership skills. So going back to the previous question as well, where if they don't have a lot of work experience to reference, this is a good question to reference personal life anecdotes as well. If clients are asked this and they never had to practice leadership skills, they can be honest as well. Especially if the position that they're applying for doesn't require leadership skills. If they're not going for a supervisor position, it's okay to admit that they don't have experience with leadership. A good answer to give is, I do not have as much experience in leadership. I would love to find a company where I can grow and use those skills to my advantage. If the client does have an example, they should keep it short and highlight the solution to the problem. Another common interview question is, how do you prioritize your work? Employers are looking to hear about time management and if the applicant knows what is most important to accomplish in the job position. So clients should use an example of how they're able to focus on each task and complete it to the best of their ability. Obviously, making sure to double check for mistakes. So you can discuss with the client what methods does the applicant use to organize and sort incoming information to make a solid decision on what to do first. This moment, it can be beneficial for the client to be honest. And if they have a hectic schedule, maybe a lot of kids, maybe they're in a transitional period in their life, it wouldn't be beneficial to say, yes, I have an open schedule, my work comes first, I have no other priorities, because that can catch up with them later on in that job. It can also be beneficial to the applicant, to the client, in finding a job that would be flexible with them and their schedule and their lifestyle as well. So answering this question can be a little tricky. And again, the benefit of discussing it with your client ahead of time can give them not only confidence in their answer, but confidence in their situation as well. Maybe they're struggling with ideas on how to prioritize work. Maybe they're coming from a situation where they haven't had to work and they do not know how this is going to be implemented into their new life. So talking about this with your clients ahead of time can be beneficial in making them comfortable with this question. Another common question is, what is your work style? Are you more comfortable with working independently or completing tasks with coworkers? This question is very important and can come up depending on the job position. What is your work style? So what does that mean? So if the job requires collaboration from other coworkers, clients should cater to that answer. This also can be beneficial in discussing with the client to know what type of jobs they would like to apply for. If they like working with people, working on a team, if they feel they have good team skills and good communication skills, if they feel they work better independently, if they find that their skills highlight them more as an independent worker. For example, if the job is in the medical field, it is important to be able to communicate with other hospital personnel and doctors to properly care for patients. So being able to work as a part of a team is beneficial. So if the coworker feels that they are better in a team environment, it can be good to list specific traits and qualities and skills that make them good for a team environment. Communication, I work well with others. I am good at delegating tasks, things like that. If they feel they work better more independently, and the job that they're going for requires a little bit more independence, they can speak to those skills. I'm very organized. I work well by myself. I handle pressure by myself very well. So different traits like that. Okay, so another commonly asked interview question. Tell me about a time that you made a mistake and had to fix it at work. So this question can be very tricky because the client would have to admit to a mistake that they have made, but that's okay because these can be very growing moments and can display growth of any specific attribute or skill. The response should be honest without placing the blame on anyone else. The applicant should discuss how they learned from the mistake. And it's more important than persuading the interviewer that it wasn't your fault. Try to empower the client to not focus so much on the mistake, but focus more on how they were able to make it work and how they were able to fix it. Also explaining that it's okay to make a mistake, that we all make mistakes, making them feel comfortable and, maybe saying, I've made mistakes before in the past. No employer and no one is expecting you to be perfect. So stating the mistake is okay. So in answering this question, try to focus more on a situation where the mistake resulted in a positive result, where they ended up fixing the problem. So employers want people who are self-aware. Earlier in my career, I missed a deadline. At a past job, I misplaced a file. How do you fix that mistake? Showing that you're self-aware shows that you can hold yourself accountable and you can have growth in those situations. So another common question, what motivates you as a person and how could that benefit the company? So this is one of those questions that clients say they have difficulty if not prepared. Pick one thing and make sure it is somewhat relevant to the role. Have the client reflect on past experiences to find what motivates them and can be relevant to the job. So for example, a waitress, making people happy motivates me. I love to be around food. So certain statements like that as a waitress can speak to how the company can benefit from them. Having a happy waitress that's motivating to attending to the guests. I like when I'm able to complete what needs to get done each day to keep me organized. So this lets the company know not only would they benefit from the client's organizational skills, but the client is happy and enjoys completing tasks. So the company would benefit by not only having an organized employee, but a motivated employee as well. I would like to eventually work in the kitchen. This speaks to the client's dedication to the job and wanting growth in the company. So these type of statements are good examples of how clients can show how the company would benefit from them. In showing that they're looking to move up in the company shows that they have dedication and that they're looking to stay more long-term. And if the company values that and is looking for someone who wants to stick around a little longer, that can help the client in getting the position or having a successful interview. Is there anything we should know that is not on your resume? So this is where clients would want to mention something important that they might want to disclose. I advise clients only to mention if the employer talks about doing a background check. So this is where clients might get a little nervous if they have something on their record. This is relevant to domestic violence victims because a lot of times, even victims in the situations have some form of police record. It is very common for abusers to file police reports against the victim and retaliate through the court or legally against the victim. So it is common and it has happened where the victim has something that might come up on a background check. So advise the clients only to mention if the employer talks about something that might come up in the background check during the interview. Clients can consider mentioning other volunteer opportunities that have taken advantage of in the community, or if you did other work not listed. Sometimes the clients might have a long volunteering background. They might have a list of volunteering opportunities that they had. And because when organizing a resume, we like to keep it to one page length, Sometimes we might not be able to add everything that we would like to a resume. And this is the opportunity for the client to add anything that they might not have been able to list that is relevant to the position that they're applying for, or any skills not mentioned as well. Sometimes when we're creating resumes, we think that we've thought of everything, we've gone through it a few times, and then during the interview, we might pick up on something that the employer values that we harness ourselves, or the client harnesses themselves. So in those moments through the interview, if they can think of anything that wasn't mentioned in their resume, this is something that this is a moment they can take to bring it up. So common interview questions: when can you start? Make sure clients know when they can start before going into the interview, just in case they get hired on the spot. This is definitely something you would like to discuss with your client beforehand. They might have to figure out childcare and transportation if they have to start on the spot. So having certain things prepared ahead of time can be beneficial. Maybe speaking to someone ahead of time and letting them know that if they start, they might need childcare, having some form of transportation set up for themselves, because that can be really relevant to the job. That's why a lot of employers do ask, do you have reliable transportation? If clients use public transportation and have a way of getting to the office and they don't have a car, they don't have to say their mode of transportation. It's up to their discretion whether they want to share this with the employer or not. So as long as the employer knows that they'll be able to get to and from work during their scheduled hours, then that's all the employer needs to know. It's up to the discretion of the client what information they feel comfortable sharing. So right now that we are living post-pandemic, there are a lot of questions that clients might have relating to quarantine, relating to COVID. How are you doing post-quarantine world? So the client can share as little as they can. I'm glad to be out and able to get to work again. Quarantine made me realize how I would like to spend my time and what I love to do most. How do you feel about returning to work in person? These questions are questions that you should definitely discuss with your client beforehand. Really understanding their level of comfortability returning to work in person. Is that something that they feel comfortable doing? Would they rather a job where they're working more online, working virtually? I feel physically and mentally ready to work again because I don't want to waste time in building my career. That can be an example of how a client might feel. But definitely gauging their level of comfortability and empowering them to share that with the employer. Will you get the vaccination if it is required for the job position? Where can make the vaccination mandated? Clients should get used to answering this question. So the employer does have the right to make the vaccination mandated for the client to work there. So clients should have an idea of whether or not them getting vaccinated is something they're comfortable with. Not every job will require a vaccination, but them understanding whether they're comfortable or not can help them decide what career to choose or what job to choose. Something else I'd like to mention that's very important since post-quarantine is job interviews virtually. So I'd like to take the time to talk a little bit about that. When preparing for a virtual interview, you really want to make sure that you have all your tech straightened out. Your computer audio is working, your microphone is working, your Wi-Fi is working and has good speed. Sometimes testing it beforehand, even if you know it's working, can still be beneficial. It has happened to me where my microphone works perfectly fine, and then maybe 20 minutes before a Zoom meeting, it stopped working. So checking it before the interview to make sure everything is working is very beneficial. Also, the attire, understanding that you will be visible to some degree on the camera, and that your hair and your makeup and your attire should still be presentable, as we spoke about previously in the webinar on what is appropriate professionally. We also want to note the location where you will be during your virtual interview. How is the lighting? Is it somewhere where there's a lot of background noise? Is it somewhere where there will be a lot of traffic in and out and be distracting to you during your interview? You really want to make sure that you have a comfortable environment during this interview and you take time aside to be by yourself during this time. So aside from the interview being virtually over the computer, the questions being asked are pretty much the same. So as far as preparing for your answers, it will be the same thing for a virtual interview. Making the client comfortable on camera can definitely be something that you can practice beforehand if you have the capacity, the platform to practice maybe a video call with the client, so they can feel more comfortable being on camera, because it is a different experience. So understanding that now with COVID, it has changed a lot of our day-to-day life, especially in our career. So this might change not only the interview, but the questions being asked during the interview. And questions related to COVID are definitely bound to come up. A lot of the employers want to gauge your level of comfortability, especially asking questions like, how are you doing post-quarantine? They really want to gauge what your job experience during this time and how your career has been affected. I think a lot of employers are mindful of how the workforce has changed since post-quarantine. So this is a question that the client should definitely become familiar with and comfortable asking, and empowering them to be honest. What happened in the world was a shock to everyone. And I think that most people are understanding of that, and most employers are understanding of that. So practicing these answers with the clients to see the best way to reflect that honesty and set boundaries if that's what they're most comfortable with, for their safety. So a COVID-related question: how did the pandemic affect your career goals? If clients experience domestic violence incidents during quarantine, this could be difficult to talk about. So this is another reason why we talk about this before the interview. An example is the pandemic gave me time to think about what career path I want to be in. It may have put my career on hold for a little, but now I know more about what I want to reflect in my career. Assist clients in coming up with positive answers. So this is the client's way of saying that, they had to stop working during the pandemic, but that they're looking to get back into the workforce and take their career in the appropriate direction for them. So this answer is an example of how you practicing with the client can help them organize and use appropriate words to better reflect their answer. So we want to prep our clients for these questions and empowering them to only share what they feel comfortable, empowering them to set boundaries if that's what feels safe to them. We want to make sure not to go into too much of an emotional anecdote. It can be a little bit distracting. Using terms like "this year made me realize," I focused on keeping myself and my loved ones safe. It can be very relatable in that moment. Make sure to advise clients to ask COVID-related questions to the company as well. In discussing COVID, it's not only about answering the employer's questions, it can also be about establishing boundaries and letting the employer know your level of comfortability. Make sure to advise clients to ask COVID-related questions to the company as well. Are vaccinations required to work in the office? How did the company function during quarantine period? Were employees working from home? This can help the client gauge how the company manages their employees during this time. This can let the client know if the employers would be letting the employees work from home, if that's something the client is more comfortable with, if that's something the client is looking to do. Understanding that with COVID, we go through waves and that there are moments where as a community, we might feel a little bit more safer and the numbers are down. And then there are waves when the numbers begin to go up again and there might be a little bit more precaution. So asking the employees how they handle those certain situations, and if you would have the option of working from home, given the type of job that you're applying for, it can be extremely beneficial. So another question to ask is, do we need masks in the office? This is also very important to ask your employer. As far as knowing, do you have to wear a mask to work yourself? And also gauging whether you feel comfortable other people not wearing a mask around you. I understand that right now there is an extreme need for our survivors of domestic violence to enter the workforce or re-enter the workforce. But at the same time, we don't want to devalue their concerns for their health or their family's health. So talking to them about boundaries and talking to them about the reality of the workforce right now can really help them gauge what works best for them. So another common thing that you would hear in an interview is, do you have any questions for us? So at this time is where the client can ask the employer any questions that they might have about the company. You definitely want to talk to your clients about asking questions. It's definitely important and shows the employer your interest in the company and in the position. It also empowers the applicant to understand that they too have rights as an employee. And that it's not only, the interview is not only to see if the client is appropriate for the company, but also to see if the company is appropriate for the client. So we like to advise to ask about 2 to 3 questions about the company. And a lot of times if not most of the time, we have the clients have these questions prepared ahead of time. And if sometimes these questions might come up to them organically throughout the interview. But they're usually a list of set questions that are beneficial to ask. Some examples can be what your salary would be, when your start position would be, and especially now with COVID, any COVID-related concerns that you might have. These are just some examples of the many questions that the clients can ask the employer. Talking to them ahead of time about what questions they want to ask can be beneficial to gauge the appropriateness of the question and maybe help them find better ways to pose the question. So some other examples are, is there any training necessary to start the position? How long has the company been in its location? And another all-star question to ask is, what do you look for in a candidate? This can really help the applicant gauge on what the company is looking for and what attributes they really value. Even if at this moment the client isn't confident about the interview and isn't sure how the interview has gone so far, these type of questions and knowing their answers can be beneficial to the client moving forward in any other interviews or in their attempts to seeking further employment. So, along with discussing questions that can come up on interviews and preparing the clients with their specific answers, it's also beneficial to host mock interviews with the client. So maybe after you've gone through the questions and discussed certain answers, now we can sit down and really practice what it's going to feel like during the interview, whether that be virtually or in person. During this time, clients need us to be patient and allow them the time to process questions. Because even though in that moment, even though our attempt is to make it realistic, we are understanding that it's a practice session. So they might take some time to answer the questions at first. They might hesitate and have a longer train of thought in those moments. But that's good because this is our time that we've set aside for them to do that, to have those longer chains of thoughts and maybe second guess themselves in that moment. That way, when they do go to the interview, they feel more comfortable and have already had certain questions thought out. And it's different when you're thinking about the answer to a question and when you're posed that same question under a pressure situation, feeling like you're actually in the interview. If they want to have a pen and pad to write things down, that can be beneficial as well. Everyone learns differently and everyone studies differently. So really meet the client where they're at, even if that might not be your preferred style of learning. Excuse me. So during experience, clients have trouble with what they should do with their hands during an interview. This comes up a lot, actually, with our survivors of domestic violence. I actually had a client whose face would shake, her cheeks would tremble when she was nervous. And her way of helping herself in that situation would be to hold her face. We had to practice different cognitive ways, cognitive behavioral therapy ways to maybe give her different things to do with her hands, other ways to distract her anxiety in that way, in that moment, her to channel it in a different way, because it can be very distracting to have a client talking in an interview with their hand on their face. Especially, it's not a good look whether it's on a virtual interview or an interview in person. And becoming more hyper aware in different things that you might do with your hands when you're nervous can then perpetuate more nervousness and lead the client to continue those actions. So maybe finding ways to help the client pace themselves. Maybe that can help slow down the train of emotions as it's happening as well. Having something in their hand, something small in their hand that they can feel, they can touch and have a physical experience with when they're feeling anxious or feeling nervous. If that's something that they need that would make them feel more comfortable. It's important to discuss these things with the client, and especially during mock interviews, to see if maybe some ways that you guys have come up with together to remedy the situation, to make sure it's still not distracting. You don't want to heal, or you don't want to fix one problem with another. Fix one distracting movement with another distracting movement. But the point at that moment is to work with the client to make them feel more comfortable in that situation. We want to acknowledge if what they're feeling in that moment is nervousness or anxiety. Acknowledge how that physically manifests in the client and help them work through that. For the real mock interview, advise clients to keep their hands on their laps and refrain from making wild gestures in their hands. I had a client who found it beneficial to hold a paperclip in her hand, and her hands maintained on her, she did maintain her hands on her lap, and she had the paperclip in her hand. So she found it to not be distracting. I'm not sure if the interviewer even noticed she had the paperclip in her hand because her hands were on her lap. But after practicing through the mock interview with the paperclip, she found that more beneficial than maybe sitting on her hands, which is what she had done previously. So practicing those moments in the mock interviews where the client might start to feel that stress or that pressure in that situation, practicing these activities that will help them in the moment. And with domestic violence survivors, this is something that we actually have to practice a lot with them. A lot of times their body has natural reactions to anxiety or stress based on their previous experience. So this is something that is very beneficial to touch base with your clients. It can offer them confidence in that moment, and that can be what leads them to get the job. So mock interviews are helpful to clients because they're in a safe space and they're with their advocate. So again, they're able to practice those high stressful situations, high pressure situations in a safe environment. They know their advocate, and they know their advocate is not going to judge them if they give the wrong answer. So they feel more confident practicing and exploring different answers with their advocate. they may not feel as judged by someone who understands them and listens to their insecurity. So it's best to practice with them first. A lot of the times the client feels more calm with the advocate. They're used to that environment that the advocate has set with them during their sessions. So this is the optimal practicing environment. So right now I've listed a link to some resources that I'd be more than happy to add to the chat. Thank you so much for hearing my presentation today. If you'd like, we can touch base to some questions on the chat at this time.
Thank you so much, Franchely. This was great. I think when you were talking, there was a lot of discussion in the chat box about preparing for the interview. And one of the main questions that came up, it was about how to prep like a survivor that in a way that they don't look like too coached, too prepared, like feeling or looking more natural, because I think sometimes that happens in the interview. So that was like one of the main topic that everybody was basically like providing some comments.
That's actually a great question. And I'm sure it comes up very frequently, very often, especially in the clients that feel more comfortable writing things down. I found that I have to continue to emphasize to them to not read verbatim what's written on their notepad or something like that. But I think a good way to avoid them feeling too coached is maybe avoiding them repeating certain answers over and over again in a way. For example, if the topic is comfortability at work with COVID, if you find that the second time they answered the question about being in the office in person, they answered it the exact same way as the first time around, maybe kind of going back and dissecting their answer a little bit, practicing with them using different words to describe similar things, as well as kind of in a way, not to sound too cliche, but empowering them to speak from their heart, empowering them to come with honesty as well as preparedness in that moment. I think that can be beneficial, but it definitely is difficult because a lot of our survivors don't have experience in the workforce, and they're definitely coming to you from a place of tell me what to do, tell me what I need, give me the tools for success, and they want to execute it perfectly. So that definitely can come up a lot.
Yeah, exactly.
I hope that does answer your question and help.
I think with your answer and all the discussion we had in the chat box, that was very helpful. There was another question from one of the participants who asked, what percentage of your clients typically secure a full or formal interview, either virtual or in person?
The question is, what percentage do I find have virtual interviews as opposed to in person?
No, what percentage of the clients that you are helping usually typically secure an interview, like a formal interview?
That's a great question. I would say, so when I started working at this position as a job specialist, I was at the beginning of 2020. So my experiences has primarily been during the pandemic, during quarantine. And during the time, I found a lot of people securing virtual interviews. A lot of my clients sometimes would have 2 or 3 interviews in one day. So I think that during that time, there was a strong need for virtual employees, calling jobs for call centers and things like that. So a lot of people were getting laid off or quitting their job due to safety concerns. So I would say a percentage, I'd say about 60 to 70% of my clients were getting virtual interviews at that time.
Right.
say that it was harder for them to secure those jobs, I think, because of the high level of interviews that they were conducting at that time.
Right. Yeah. I think this topic that you touched on about the COVID, it was very important. There has been a lot of employment changes during the COVID, and that's the reality of the basically market, and what's going on with the pandemic. But one thing that I find it always hard in the interviews to answer is, why are you changing your job, or what is the reason you are like leaving your previous job if you're so like happy about it. So it's like this question, it's actually can be daunting for some people. Like, how do we answer it in a way that there might be some really issues with the job that you are like the work that you're currently doing, their pay, their benefits, there's like the environment you want to change. So how do you approach that positively in a way that, but it shows the reality too. Like, it's not like, you're lying to to your potential employer.
Absolutely, because we definitely don't want to do that. That can definitely catch up with us in the future. But I think a great way to answer that question would be highlighting the time that the person maybe might have had to think. I've had some time to think about my career paths and really think about the changes happening right now in the world and how that is going to affect my career in the future. And just stating that they've had time to think. We've all had a lot of time to think. So they've had time to think and really they've come to the conclusion that they would like to change directions in their career path, as opposed to, I would just like to make some money and find any job employment at this point. But yeah, I think any employer would be would understand that answer.
All right, thank you so much. I don't know if there is any other questions in the chat box, or anybody would like to pose any comments, any contribution even to the topic. And this is our last session, so this is the chance. So it doesn't seem like there's any questions. I just wanted to say that the resources are available, and my colleague Jennifer kindly shared them several times here. Thank you so much. There is like really good information in the resources about like potential places to find, job opportunities or employment opportunities or refer survivors. So I would really refer you to check them out and like check the website, check the links, and let us know if you have any questions. Yeah, we are going to stay on a little bit further, like a little bit, couple of more minutes, in case anybody has any questions. But I really want to thank you, everyone. Thank you, the interpreters. Thank you to Franchely. Thank you for everybody, my colleagues, for contribution, and also Jennifer for all her hard work here.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
I appreciate everybody's time.
Yes.
Well, I wish everybody's a good day. It's Thursday, it's Friday Eve. It's coming up. I'm so happy.